Something is settling today. Not in the sense of resolving cleanly, not in the way you have probably been hoping the week would resolve, but settling in the specific sense that reactions are forming, positions are becoming visible, and the people in your life are beginning to show you, through their behavior, exactly where they actually stand. This is the part of the cycle that most people are least prepared for. The pressure phase, the decision phase, the communication phase, those all have a quality of active engagement that feels manageable because you are doing something. Watching is harder. Waiting for behavior to confirm what you already suspect is harder. Holding space for the possibility that what you are about to see might not be what you were hoping to see. That requires a specific kind of steadiness that the earlier parts of this week did not demand. March 4th demands it. The conversations that happened, or did not happen, over the last several days are now producing consequences that are becoming visible in how people are engaging with you. The message you sent is being responded to, or not responded to, in ways that are telling you something. The silence from someone who should have reached out is telling you something. The unexpected check-in from someone you were not thinking about is telling you something. The shift in a person's tone, subtler than what they are saying explicitly, but legible in how they are saying it, is telling you something. Mercury retrograde in Pisces has been doing something throughout this week that its early disorienting phase made harder to see clearly. Beneath the communication glitches, beneath the emotional fog, beneath the perceptual distortion that made careful restraint necessary for several days, Mercury retrograde has been running a process of revealing alignment, or more precisely, misalignment. The retrograde period is when the gap between what people say and how they actually behave becomes more visible than usual. When the commitments that were expressed without genuine backing behind them start to show their lack of backing. When the people who are genuinely present in your life demonstrate that presence through the quality of their engagement during a difficult period. When the people who are present more in word than in practice begin to show that too. What you are watching today is the output of that process. The week applied pressure. The pressure produced behavior. The behavior is now visible, and it is considerably more informative than anything anyone has said. Before going further, it is worth understanding specifically why Mercury retrograde in Pisces produces this kind of revealing dynamic, because the mechanism matters for how you interpret what you are seeing. Mercury governs communication and the exchange of information. When it moves retrograde, the precision and reliability of deliberate communication decreases. People say things less accurately, words are interpreted less accurately, intentions and impact consistently fail to align in the ways that forward-moving Mercury supports. What this means is that the intentional communication layer of relationships, the things people say deliberately, the reassurances they offer, the commitments they articulate, becomes less reliable as a guide to what is actually true about those relationships. The intentional layer gets distorted by the retrograde conditions. What does not get distorted in the same way as behavior? Actions taken under Mercury retrograde are not running through the same filter of deliberate communication that words run through. When someone responds quickly to your message because something in them genuinely wants to maintain the connection, that responsiveness is not a product of careful word choice subject to Mercury retrograde interference. It is simply behavior reflecting actual investment. When someone goes quiet at exactly the moment the dynamic became real and required something of them, that silence is also simply behavior, and it reflects something about their actual investment that their previous words may not have disclosed accurately. This is why the guidance for today is specifically about watching behavior rather than listening to words. The words available right now, under Mercury retrograde in Pisces, are still running through a distorted medium. The behavior is happening in a more direct register and is correspondingly more trustworthy as a guide to what is actually present in the people and situations around you. Pisces adds something specific to this dynamic as well. Pisces governs the emotional subconscious, the layer of a person's experience and motivation that operates below their deliberate self-presentation. Under a Pisces influence, that subconscious layer is closer to the surface than usual. People are operating more from emotional instinct and less from careful social management. The defenses they usually maintain around their genuine feelings and genuine priorities are more porous. What this means in practice is that how someone treats you right now, in this specific window, is a relatively unfiltered expression of where you sit in their actual inner world, not in their managed social presentation of you, but in their real priorities and genuine emotional investment. The person who is showing up for you this week, who has been consistent, who responded when you reached out, who offered something real when the situation became difficult, that behavior is meaningful. It is coming from a place that is less filtered than usual. You are seeing something close to how this person actually operates when the social performance pressure is lowered and the emotional environment is complex. The person who has been inconsistent, who has gone quiet at the moments that required presence, whose engagement has been surface level or whose response to your vulnerability has been deflection or distance, that is also meaningful. Not as a final verdict on who this person is across all contexts and all time, but as a clear and relatively unfiltered signal about where you currently are in their genuine priorities. What people show you during hard weeks is more informative than what they show you during easy ones. Easy weeks do not require anything of people. Showing up during an easy week tells you very little about whether they will show up when something is genuinely at stake. Hard weeks, by contrast, sort. The people for whom you are a genuine priority find a way to demonstrate that even when the circumstances are complicated or the energy is difficult. The people for whom you are a peripheral consideration tend to become progressively less visible as the difficulty increases. You are in a hard week. The sorting is happening. Watch it. The specific things you may be noticing today fall into a few recognizable patterns, and they are worth naming concretely. Delayed responses from people who are usually prompt. The person who typically responds quickly is now taking longer, or whose responses have become shorter and less engaged. Under Mercury retrograde in Pisces, some delayed responses have a purely technical or logistical explanation. But when the delay is accompanied by a change in the quality of engagement, when the responses, when they do arrive, carry less warmth or less genuine presence than they usually do, the combination is worth noting. Something has shifted in their level of engagement, and the shift is more legible right now than it might be in a less emotionally revealing period. Shorter conversations with people who typically go deeper with you. A quality of surface skimming in exchanges that usually have more substance. The person who normally engages with what you actually say versus the person who responds to the topmost layer of it and moves on. The contraction in the depth of engagement is information. It may reflect their own internal state and have nothing to do with you specifically. Or it may be a behavioral response to something in the dynamic that they are processing or avoiding. You cannot know which without more information, but you can notice the contraction and hold it as a data point rather than immediately explaining it away. Unexpected support from someone you were not expecting to show up. The person who was not on your list of people to count on who has, over the course of this week, demonstrated something genuine. An unprompted check-in. A response that went beyond what you asked for. A quality of presence that showed up without being solicited and without requiring anything in return. This is worth more than the person who has been vocally supportive in language, but less present in actual behavior. Do not overlook the unexpected source of genuine support because it does not fit the map of your relationships that you brought into this week. Mercury retrograde in Pisces revises maps. Let it. Unexpected distance from someone you relied on to be present. The person whose support you expected and whose behavior has not matched that expectation. This is likely the most uncomfortable data that March 4th is producing for many people. When someone you have been counting on, someone whose presence you had reason to expect, becomes less available or less engaged at exactly the moment the situation became more demanding, that gap between expectation and behavior is significant information. It does not necessarily tell you everything about this person or this relationship. but it tells you something that is worth holding clearly rather than immediately explaining away with the most charitable interpretation available. The natural response to unexpected distance from someone important is to chase, to increase the volume or frequency of communication, to seek reassurance, to find the explanation that restores the sense of security the distance has disturbed. The guidance for today is specifically against that response. Not because the relationship is necessarily over or irreparable, but because chasing under Mercury retrograde in Pisces consistently produces worse outcomes than allowing the behavior to complete its natural expression. When you chase, you interrupt the sorting process. You introduce a new variable, your pursuit, that changes the behavior you were in the process of observing. The behavior you would have seen if you had held still becomes unavailable, replaced by a response to your pursuit that is much harder to read accurately. Hold still. Let the behavior continue expressing itself without interruption. What someone does when you do not chase them is considerably more informative than what they do when you do. If they continue to disengage, you have clearer information about the actual state of things. If they re-engage on their own, you have information of a different kind, that the distance was temporary, situational, and not a reflection of their underlying investment. Either outcome gives you more to work with than the interpretation you would construct around their behavior if you interrupted it with pursuit. The guidance to not over-explain also extends to today's dynamic. When you sense distance from someone, or when you have said or done something during this emotionally complex week that you are uncertain about, the impulse to explain yourself, to provide context, to offer the reasoning behind your actions, to make sure they understand what you actually meant, is natural and understandable. Under Mercury retrograde in Pisces, it tends to compound the problem rather than resolve it. Over-explanation in a distorted communication environment gives the distortion more material to work with. The additional context you provide gets filtered through the same perceptual conditions that produced the misunderstanding in the first place, and often makes the situation more complicated rather than clearer. If something needs clarification, one sentence of clarification is almost always more effective than a paragraph. State the essential thing, the actual core of what you want the other person to understand, and stop. Leave space for them to absorb it and respond. Their response will tell you more than any amount of additional explanation you could add. The broader principle at work today is that your role in most of the dynamics you are navigating right now is observer rather than director. This is a hard posture to maintain when you are emotionally invested in the outcomes, when the stakes feel high, when the people whose behavior you are watching matter to you. The pull toward intervention, toward sending the additional message, toward initiating the follow-up conversation, toward doing something that might influence the direction things are heading, is real and will be present all day. Sitting with that pull without acting on it, while continuing to observe what is unfolding, is the most effective thing you can do today. You are not passive. You are gathering information that the dynamics are producing for you, and that information has a different quality and a different reliability than the information you would gather through active intervention. Let it arrive. There is something specific about the next few days, March 4th through approximately March 7th or 8th, that makes this window particularly significant in terms of what behavior reveals. The week's earlier tension created conditions that are now producing a natural sorting of alignment. Who has been consistent? Who has pulled back? Who has shown up in ways that exceeded expectation? Who has revealed through their behavior a gap between what they have said and how they actually operate? This sorting is not a manufactured test. You did not design it. It is the natural output of a period of sustained pressure operating on the relationships and situations in your life. But this window does not stay open indefinitely. As the week continues and Mercury retrograde moves toward its eventual direct station, the emotional intensity that is currently making behavior more unfiltered and more revealing will gradually ease. People will return to their more managed self-presentations. The things they are showing you right now, through the relative rawness of this period, will become harder to see as clearly. What you observe between now and the end of this week is some of the most accurate information you will have access to about the genuine state of your important relationships and situations. This is why the guidance is to watch carefully, not anxiously, not from a place of trying to find evidence for a conclusion you have already drawn. From a place of genuine, clear-eyed observation of what behavior is telling you, without the overlay of either the most optimistic or the most catastrophic interpretation. Observe actions over promises. Promises made during Mercury retrograde in Pisces are particularly unreliable, not because the people making them are deliberately deceptive, but because the perceptual conditions of this period mean that people often genuinely believe commitments they are not actually in a position to fulfill. What someone does consistently and over time is a more reliable guide to their actual capacity and intention than what they say they will do in a moment of emotional resonance or social pressure. Do not chase. What withdraws when given space and does not return on its own is telling you something important about its actual investment. What remains present or re-engages unprompted after a brief withdrawal is also telling you something. Both kinds of information are valuable. Neither is available if you fill the space with pursuit before the behavior can complete its natural expression. Do not force clarity through confrontation today. The clarity is unfolding through behavior, and the unfolding is producing more accurate information than a confrontation under Mercury retrograde in Pisces conditions would produce. Confrontation right now is likely to produce defensiveness, explanation, and deliberate communication, all of which run through the distorted medium and are correspondingly less reliable. The behavioral clarity available through observation is unmediated and therefore more trustworthy. Let the behavior complete its expression before you decide what conversation is needed and how to have it. When something you observe today confirms something you have already been sensing, when a behavior aligns with a feeling you have been having about a person or situation that you have been trying to override with charitable interpretation, let that confirmation register. The felt sense that something was off, that the investment was not mutual, that the words and the behavior were not matching, that felt sense was gathering evidence all along. When the evidence arrives clearly, trust it rather than immediately looking for the counter-evidence that would restore the more comfortable interpretation. And when something you observe today surprises you positively, when someone shows up in a way you were not expecting, when a relationship reveals more depth or resilience than you had credited it with, let that register with equal clarity. The Mercury retrograde sorting process does not only reveal absence, it also reveals presence. Some of what you discover this week will be that certain people in your life are more genuinely there than you realized, that certain connections you had been treating as lower priority have more real backing behind them than you were giving them credit for. Hold all of it, the confirming data and the surprising data, the disappointing and the encouraging. You are building a more accurate picture of your relational landscape, and accuracy requires holding all of the available information rather than filtering for the parts that fit the existing picture. March 4th does not require you to do much. That is, paradoxically, its most demanding feature. The demand is to hold still, observe clearly, and resist the multiple pulls toward intervention that the emotional intensity of this period generates. The demand is to trust that what is unfolding is producing the information you need, and that receiving that information clearly is a more useful task right now than attempting to direct the outcome. Something is becoming clear, not through the conversations you are having, not through the words people are using, but through the behavior that the week's pressure has produced in everyone around you. That clarity is available right now in a form that is more reliable than most of the deliberate communication of the past several days. You do not need to force it. You do not need to accelerate it. You do not need to confront it into existence. Watch carefully. The next few days will show you more than this entire month of words has shown you. What you see, if you are willing to see it without flinching, that is your clarity. That is what March 4th is offering. Receive it,